workshop. Today we're going to build a toy, an alphabet wagon. It's a great learning toy. We made a visit to a wonderful museum to look at the original. I'll take you there next, right here on the New Yankee Workshop.
The New Yankee Workshop features the craftsmanship of Norm Abram.
Today we're at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. It's one of the oldest and largest collections in all of New England. Here on the second floor is where they keep the toy collection. Over 2,500 objects, everything from Barbie dolls to rocking horses. And I'm told it's being added to daily. Look at these dolls. This one is made from cloth. This is a porcelain doll. And around the corner, those are a composite material. Down below is one of my favorites. Look at this old tin delivery truck. And next to it, a tin streetcar. It's amazing the condition of these pieces. Over in this next case are some games, word games. Here's one, anagrams. Up at this shelf, there are jigsaw puzzles, even an old wooden one. And look at this up here. Not all the pieces are old. An Etch-a-Sketch. I even had one of those. Now, in this great space, we find a collection of American decorative arts. Everything from grandfather clocks to cigar store Indians. And around the perimeter, there are period rooms. A parlor from 1800, a bedroom from 1800, and down here at the end, a kitchen from 1750. And we can see that the children have been here. A Windsor chair with a doll. It has a wooden head. A wooden horse that can be towed around. And this cart filled with blocks, which is what I wanted you to see. Now, the cart itself has some holes in it. I'm not sure what those are for. Maybe this was something to carry objects around and it was converted into the cart. It has a lock joint on the corner, wooden wheels, and wooden hubs. The blocks themselves have images, numbers, and letters. I wonder how I go about making those. Well, here's our version of the alphabet wagon. One of the things I like about this project is that I didn't have to go to the lumberyard for any of the material. I built it all from scraps that were left over here in the shop. There's a little bit of everything. Some cherry and ash for the sides, mahogany for the wheels, and the blocks are made from maple and some more mahogany for the letters or the numbers. If you'd like to build one of these, a measure drawing is available with the materials list, and you'll hear more about that before this program ends. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now let's get started on the alphabet wagon. Here are some pieces of ash and cherry that I'm going to use for the sides of the wagon. Because they've been sitting around the shop for a while, there's some discoloration. And because they were probably purchased at different times, there may be a variation in the thickness as there is between these two boards. To prevent any problems later in the construction process, I want to make all the pieces uniformly thick. And to do that, I'm going to run them through my surface plane. The next step is to run one edge of each board through the joiner. With one edge, straight and square, I can now rip the pieces to the correct width, adding a little extra for one final pass through the joiner. Now it's just a matter of cutting the pieces to length. The corners of the wagon are joined with through dovetails. The cherry piece is the piece I want to cut the tails in, so I've secured it here in my workbench. Now I'm going to use this dovetailing fixture. I can place it anywhere I want on the end of the board, but I'm going to center these two fingers on the width, just by eye, and clamp it in place. I've equipped my router with a dovetailing bit, which actually has a ball bearing at the top edge. That ball bearing is going to follow the fingers of the jig, and the bit will do the work. Now this is going to be corner number 1. The ash gets the pins. To lay out for the pins, I take the piece with the tails cut in it, align it flush with the edge, and have this back shoulder just align with the back edge of the ash piece and draw a fine line. Now with an additional fixture, which is meant for cutting the pins, I align the edge of the finger to just cover the pencil line and clamp it in place. The router bit that I'm going to use to cut the pins also has a ball bearing at the top, but it's a straight cutting bit instead of a dovetailing bit. Let's see how they fit. Doesn't get any better than that. Now let's do the other corners. The bottom of the wagon is a piece of 1/2-inch plywood that sits in a groove. I hold the groove up from the bottom edge of the sides 3/4 of an inch to leave room for the axles. To make the groove, I'm using a plunge router with a guide fence and a 1/2-inch straight cutting bit. I've set it up so that the bit will plunge 3/8 of an inch into the work. So that the groove won't show through the dovetails, I'm going to start just short of this end and stop before I go through the other end. Here I'm drilling 7/16-inch diameter holes for the axles. Well, now I'm ready for a little assembly. Applying glue to all the mating surfaces of the dovetails. I want to install the ash sides first, and then after putting the glue on the dovetail pieces, I'll slip them into place. Couple clamps to hold the joints together while the glue sets up. In the meantime, we'll make the wheels. Cut the wheels, I'm using what is known as a circle or wheel cutter. It's a special device that has a pilot drill in the middle, which allows me to start into the piece of wood. Then it has a bar which is adjustable for varying diameters up to 6 inches. On one end, there's a very sharp cutter that's installed that cuts through the wood. Now, for safety reasons, it's very important to use the circle cutter at 500 RPMs or less. To square up the wheel, I mounted it in my drill press so that I could sand it, simply using a 1/4-inch carriage bolt. In order to make the wheel look a little bit more like a tire, I've rounded over the edges. To do that, I'm using a 1/4-inch beating bit in the router. I'm enlarging the hole in the wheel to receive the 3/8-inch axle. Using the same router bit that I used on the wheels, I've put a decorative edge around the top edge of the wagon. A little bit of sanding gives a nice finished look to the end of the axle. Now I like to apply a little bit of glue to the axle and wheel. Now that's the hole for the tow string. This wooden ball becomes the handle at the end of the string. I'm going to make the blocks from this piece of scrap 8/4 maple. Each block is 1 5/8 inch cube. I think that the best way to get perfectly square pieces is to run them through a surface plane. With my stop block set up, I can cut identical pieces for the cubes. Let's take a look at the blocks. I routed out a recess in the end grain of all the blocks. That actually leaves a little curve, a place that I can glue in the letters or numbers. One of the problems is holding the block while I route it, so I made a little jig. I took a piece of plywood and drilled and chiseled out an area exactly the same size as the block to hold the bottom. There are 2 side pieces which support another platform, which I also chiseled out so that it would fit exactly the outside dimension of the block. I also took the time to cut a hole all the way through using a drill and a jigsaw, and that's slightly smaller than the block. It'll give us the curve, and if I use a router bit with a ball bearing as a guide, it easily removes the material. Does a great job, and it's fast. Well, it's going great, but I think we'll get to the letters tomorrow. Good morning. I'm getting started this morning by assembling the materials that I'm going to need to cut the letters that go inside the blocks. I'm using some mahogany for a nice contrast. Mahogany is just scrap material I had in the shop, about 1/4 inch thick. The layout for the letters, I'm simply using these stick-on letters, which you can pick up at any stationery store. It just becomes a good outline for each shape. Now, to get nice, crisp letters like this to glue onto the blocks, there are a couple tricks. First of all, it's very helpful if you have one of these, a scroll saw. Now, The scroll saw is really a motorized version of an old carpenter's tool, the coping saw. In fact, if you wanted to, you could cut the letters with this tool. The scroll saw has a thin blade like the coping saw. The blade is mounted in a U-shaped bracket, and it goes up and down for the sawing motion. The scroll saw has a couple additional features. One is that this mechanism goes up and down to hold the work in place. There's a tube right here that actually blows air on the piece to keep the sawdust from getting in the way. I also have a variable speed control, which goes from very slow to quite fast. For this particular material and these letters, I want to be around 1,000 strokes per minute. Now, there's different tricks for different letters. Let's start with one of the simple ones, this N. I like to cut out the inside portions of the letter working towards the outside. Now, for letters that have an interior section to cut out, like the P, the A, or an O, the first thing I want to do is drill a hole near the edge of the interior. First, I'll lop off the subject letter. Now I'm going to move the hole down, up, and out of the way, release the tension on the blade, and then using this quick release knob, actually release the blade from its holder, feed it through the hole I cut at the drill press, put the blade back in the holder, reapply the tension, lower the hole down, and away we go. Now, to remove the letter, I just go through the same process. Now, the letters at this point are 1/4 of an inch thick. They only need to be 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to use this jig to cut them in half. I've made a slot in a 3/4 inch piece of stock, the same width as the thickness of the letter. And I've attached a board to the bottom with just a saw cut through it so the letter won't get pulled through. I've attached a fence to my bandsaw table. It makes it easy to cut them in half.
Order a home video of the project you've just seen Norm build, complete with a measured drawing and materials list. Call toll-free 1-800-892-0110. The price is $24.95 plus shipping and handling. Get the measured drawing alone for only $10. The number again is 1-800-892-0110.
Well, as you might expect, when I'm in charge of the alphabet wagon, I have my own hidden agenda. Now, the letters are actually being set in the end grain where the recess is, and I'm using some hot melt glue, and it works really well as long as you move along quick enough. The corners of the blocks are a little bit sharp, so I want to round them over, but not the ones that are adjacent to the recesses. I use my stationary belt sander. Now for the painting. There's a few tips here. First, the blocks are all sanded nice and smooth, and all dust is removed. I chose 6 bright colors for the blocks, colors that children will like. But in looking for paint, I wanted a few things. I wanted a high gloss paint. I wanted something that would be water-based and waterproof. But most importantly, I wanted a non-toxic paint. Now, it may take a couple coats on each piece. When they're done, it'll be pretty durable. Now, I am getting a little paint on the edge right here. We won't worry about that right now. Now, while the block's dry, let's move down the workbench and get started on the wagon. The issue here is to do something that's tough, durable, and non-toxic. So I'm going to put a gloss polyurethane on. I'm starting with a coat of sanding sealer, which will give me the right base. Now that the paint is dry, I want to remove any that might have spilled over the edge using my belt sander. Then I'll coat the block totally with clear polyurethane. A couple coats of gloss polyurethane on all the blocks should do the job. And of course, I'm using this water-based, non-toxic polyurethane. Let's see. Well, what do you think? Should improve my spelling dramatically.